Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into the rustling, quietly astonishing world of paper armor. Yes, armor, as in battlefield swords, helmets, and finely pressed mulberry pulp. You probably wouldn't last long in it, but the warriors of ancient Korea knew something you didn't. That strength didn't always clank. Sometimes it whispered. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what time is it, where you are, and what's your corner of the world like tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moon is silver and low over the valleys of Joseon, Korea. The fields shimmer with dew, and the scent of pine drifts down from the hills. You're trudging slowly through a narrow path, the fabric of your robe brushing gently against tall grass. It's nearly midnight, and the village ahead, if you can even call it that, is little more than a cluster of paper lanterns swaying gently in the breeze like fireflies tethered to wooden beams. Your boots crunch softly over packed dirt, and as you get closer, you hear it a strange papery sound. Not quite a rattle, not quite a rustle, somewhere between a book page turning and rice paper tugged loose from its frame. You duck your head under a curved gate, the wood warm from the day's sun, still holding onto the scent of lacquer and charred cedar. Inside, four figures sit cross-legged around a low brazier. One of them, an old man with impossibly white eyebrows, is slowly feeding twisted paper into the flames. Another dabs a brush into ink and sketches symbols onto long, wide sleeves that are stiff, almost like bark. You found it, the armory, but not the kind you'd expect. There's no clang of hammers, no sweat-darkened iron or piles of chainmail. Instead, everything here is soft around the edges. Rolls of bark, shelves of mulberry pulp packed in clay pots. Strings of armor pieces flutter like laundry under the beams. Pauldrons, breastplates, thigh guards, each one layered in thick folded paper and lacquered to a muted shine. They hang not like tools of war, but like sacred texts waiting to be read. A young soldier waves you over. He's barely older than a teenager, but speaks with the tired cadence of someone who's recited the same instructions far too many times. He hands you something smooth, cool, and incredibly light. A chest plate, or at least that's what he says it is. You hold it in both hands, startled by the weight or lack of it. It feels like a large book, bound thickly, its layers compacted into ridges and subtle dips. You run your fingers along the edges and feel faint impressions like brush strokes or seams from past repairs. Test it, he says simply. You raise an eyebrow. He nods toward the dummy in the corner, a straw-stuffed figure dressed in faded robes and half a mustache. An arrow juts from its side, but it's not embedded deep. It's stuck in a rigid sheet of what looks suspiciously like the thing in your hands. The armor worked. Well, mostly. There's still a hole the width of a thumb, but it looks shallow. You glance down again. Paper. Armor made of paper. Your brain keeps rebelling at the idea, but here it is. A gentle wind stirs through the slats in the wall, sending one of the paper sleeves into a soft sway. You look back at the old man tending the brazier. He's watching you with the vague amusement of someone who's seen this moment before. Confusion, disbelief, and then the slow blooming realization that this isn't a prank. The armor is real, and in some ways, it's better than iron. Lightweight, flexible, heat resistant, and most importantly for long campaigns in the Korean summer, breathable. Worn under silk or over cotton, it offered surprising protection, especially once it was lacquered, especially once layers were doubled or tripled. The Joseon military wasn't frivolous after all. They'd tested it. Archers had loosed volleys at paper armor suspended from trees. Swordsmen had tried to slash it mid-swing, and sometimes it held. Historians still argue whether these paper suits were ever issued in large numbers or just reserved for officers, messengers, or bodyguards who valued stealth and speed over brute defense. Some claim it was ceremonial. Others swear by a single haunting account of an ambush in the south where paper-armored soldiers vanished into reeds, the sound of their movements masked by rustling grass. You take a step back, listening again to that quiet crackle as the armor shifts. It's not loud, not flashy, but it fits the world you're in. Where moonlight reflects off rice paddies, where battles are more often about footwork and patience than loud charges, where survival might just depend on blending in with the rain. The brazier pops softly, sending up a puff of sweet-smelling smoke mulberry bark maybe, or something older. The old man nods toward a small cot at the far wall, its mattress lined with scraps of failed breastplates. You're not expected to fight tonight, only to sleep, but the armor stays beside you, curled slightly like a closed fan, and tomorrow you'll learn how to make your own, but the bark hasn't even been steamed yet. Dawn arrives not with a bang, but with a long, slow yawn of blue light stretching itself across the thatched rooftops. You wake to the soft sound of someone pounding something sticky in a wooden bowl. It's not a hammer this time, it's more rhythmic. Thud, pause, thud, thud, a lullaby for starch. You sit up on your cot paper scraps stuck to your sleeve and find the room mostly empty. The brazier has gone cold, though a wisp of charcoal scent still lingers, mixing with something a bit sweeter. Rice. Cooked rice. But not for breakfast. A young girl no more than 12 peeks into the doorway and beckons. She doesn't speak, just waves her ink-stained fingers. You follow, stepping out into the courtyard, where the sun is just starting to catch on the lacquered threads strung overhead like drying fish. There, under a long canopy of woven reeds, sit 3 large wooden tubs. One is filled with a pale brown paste that jiggles faintly as you peer in. Another is bubbling on a low fire, letting off a smell that's both earthy and vaguely sour, like boiled tree bark mixed with steamed rice. The third is stacked with what looks like shredded linen, or at least it would be if not for the occasional twig and tiny dark fleck of bark clinging to the edge. Welcome to the pulping station. You kneel beside an older woman, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hair wrapped in a faded headscarf the color of old tea. She hands you a paddle. No words, just a look that says get stirring, so you do. And what you stir is strange. It's mulberry bark beaten into submission, soaked for days, then mixed with glutinous rice paste, sticky, almost sweet smelling, and with a strange elasticity to it, like stirring warm oatmeal with a hint of tree in it. She adds a dash of what looks like ash from a porcelain cup. It turns the mixture cloudy, then more opaque. You don't ask, she wouldn't tell you anyway. You get the feeling recipes here are inherited more by osmosis than explanation. This isn't just for making paper armor. This is paper armor. Every scoop, every stir, every press, every bit of it matters. Need it to breathe, the woman mutters, surprising you. Her voice is low and scratchy as though it's been dried on a rack, just like the paper she makes. Too tight and it'll crack. Too soft and it'll die. You don't ask what she means by die. She nods toward a thin sheet stretched on a bamboo frame behind her. It's drying in the morning light, the corners held down with polished stones. When you move closer, you can see faint impressions in it, brush marks, accidental creases, maybe even fingerprints. It's beautiful in an odd, utilitarian way. And strong. There are rumors whispered among the villages along the Han River that a properly made sheet of armor paper could stop a blade. But only if it had been pounded 300 times and blessed by a monk who never spoke above a whisper. Superstition? Maybe. But the guards still count their strokes and the monks still whisper. You stir again, the paddle growing heavy. The texture thickens, your arms ache a little. You glance at the girl. She's watching head tilted as if deciding whether you'll ever make a good armorer or just a decent distraction. Try the glue, she says, suddenly handing you a tiny brush and a small dish filled with thick pearly paste. You kneel beside a half-formed breastplate 3 layers deep, still soft to the touch. She motions for you to brush along the seams. As you do, the layers stick together with an audible sigh like old leather seats under a warm body. This is how it's done, not poured, not molded, not stitched, but grown from bark and boiled rice and patience. Pressed, glued, and dried until a body could wear it and not break it, until arrows might think twice before continuing their path. A shout from the hillside draws your gaze upward. A man leads a mule train down the slope, each beast carrying baskets filled with coiled strips of mulberry bark. He's singing something cheerful and a little off-key, a tune about staying dry in the rain, the kind of song that doesn't make sense until you realize that wet armor means dead soldiers. And there's the quirky truth of it, some of the best armor in this village was once part of someone's roof. Or fishing net, or even their wedding decorations. Paper traveled. It was never just one thing. There's a half joke around here: if you want to survive battle, marry a paper maker. You're not sure it's a joke. You set your paddle down, arms throbbing gently, and wipe your hands on a cloth so thin it might have been a page in its former life. The sun's higher now. The paper sheets are beginning to crinkle as they dry, little waves forming like tide marks. The girl offers you a sip of barley tea, lukewarm, nutty, with a hint of ash, and you sit in the shade beside her, watching your pace settle into a slow, pulpy silence. You'll be cutting your own breastplate tomorrow, but first comes the test of the fold, and that means facing the general's napkin. The workshop quiets by afternoon as if the sun itself decided everyone ought to hush. Even the birds seem to have taken a break from chirping, and the only sound you can hear is the soft brushing of a whisk broom somewhere out of sight. It's the kind of stillness that feels like something is about to happen, but very politely. Nothing abrupt, just a slow ceremonial shifting of expectations. You're summoned with a nod. No shouting here, just nods, gestures, and the occasional throat clearing. A long, narrow room has been cleared. At the end of it stands a man whose mustache is perfectly symmetrical, his robes are folded like origami swans, and his posture is so upright it could probably balance a cup of tea on top. This is General Song, and this is his napkin. Laid out on the lacquered table before him is a single square of hand-folded paper armor, no bigger than a dinner napkin, but laminated in resin, pressed in layers, and folded so precisely, you're not sure whether it belongs on a soldier or in a royal dining hall. He doesn't greet you, he doesn't need to, the napkin does the talking. With gloved fingers, he lifts it and passes it to you like a sacred relic. You try not to drop it, which feels unfairly difficult because it's lighter than expected, but somehow more fragile too. The weight isn't the problem, it's the responsibility. He gives you one instruction: fold it. You hesitate because that seems ridiculous. Fold armor like laundry, like letters, but you do it slowly, deliberately, your hands trembling just enough to feel the stakes. It creaks, not like metal, but like old stairs under someone careful. You fold it again, diagonal this time. The corners meet, just barely. The general nods once. Then he takes the napkin from your hands, flips it open, and examines the creases like a fortune teller reading tea leaves. His brow furrows at one corner. He hums a soft, thoughtful that suggests both disappointment and curiosity. You've earned at least that much. Here folding isn't decoration, it's inspection. Armor that folds cleanly won't tear on movement. Armor that warps or bubbles. Well, let's just say it becomes excellent firewood, and it will be a cold night in the barracks if yours doesn't pass. He lifts a lacquered stick more pointer than weapon and taps a diagonal on the napkin. Too wet when pressed, he mutters. Then, with a twist of his wrist, he sets the napkin alight. You blink. The flame leaps quickly like it's eager to escape its task. In seconds, the square has curled into ash, leaving behind a faint scent of rice glue and pine soot. That was yesterday's batch, he adds, not unkindly. Yours will be better. He gestures toward the wall where 3 more pieces hang. Each bears the same shape but a different edge, one feathered like a fan one with rough scalloped layers, and one nearly translucent in places where it thinned too much during pressing. This isn't just crafting, it's language. Each piece tells a story. Each failure leaves a fingerprint. And General Song, for all his stiffness and starch, seems less interested in war than he is in stories that armor tells. He turns back to the table and begins folding another sheet, speaking to no one in particular. The Chinese had iron, the Mongols had speed, but we had patience. Even the wind respects it. He folds once, twice, tucks an edge. Historians still argue, he adds, as if in passing, whether the paper armor was a true innovation or merely a necessity when iron ran thin. He shrugs. I prefer stories where necessity is the innovation. You don't disagree. He finishes the fold. This time the napkin holds its shape perfectly. He lays it down like a jewel on velvet and walks away satisfied. The test is over, but yours isn't. You're handed your own folded square freshly dried. It's warm from the sun and smells faintly of ink and steamed bark. You fold it once. Smooth, twice. Still crisp. Then boldly a third fold. It creaks, but holds. You're allowed a small smile. A younger officer, less embroidered than the general, but clearly important, claps you on the back with enough enthusiasm to stagger a mule. You'll eat well tonight, he says, as if folding a square properly is grounds for celebration. And in this village, maybe it is. Dinner is served beneath paper lanterns, their painted koi and cranes swaying gently above you as you chew on grilled yam and sticky barley rice. The same girl from earlier passes by, brushing crumbs off your sleeve with a silent swipe. She's been promoted to quality control, apparently. You sip warm tea, its flavor bitter and comforting, and glance around the courtyard. Sheets of drying armor whisper in the wind. A corner of the workshop glows from an inner room where someone's still painting symbols on a helmet's edge. Everything here moves slowly, not lazily, deliberately. You lean back full and tired and catch the flicker of candlelight behind one of the reed walls. A shadow passes long, lean, and carrying something stiff under one arm. Tomorrow you'll learn about armor in the rain, but for now it's time to sleep beneath a roof that was once a shield, and might be again. The first drops begin like a polite warning. 1, 2, 3 soft taps against the roof tiles above your sleeping mat, then silence again, long enough that you wonder if you imagined it. But then it returns, and this time the rain is steady, slow, and stubborn. A sleepy drizzle, the kind that doesn't shout but insists. You roll over beneath your thin quilt, blinking up at the ceiling, and notice how the rain has begun to bring out the scent of dried pine and damp glue in the walls around you. It smells like your morning's work, familiar now, almost comforting, almost. Someone taps gently on the frame of your doorway twice, no words. A silent summons which feels appropriate for a lesson about silence itself. You shuffle into your boots and step outside. The world is dripping, not soaked, not stormed, just wet. The stone path is slick with mossy puddles. The thatch eaves leak in controlled streams. You pass through the back gate and find the training yard altered paper dummies in armor now glisten faintly under the sheen of rain, and beside them stands a woman you haven't met yet. She's older but moves like someone who once outran horses. Her armor, yes, she wears it even in the rain, is a dark layered paper coat with lacquered hems and small wooden toggles at the collar. She looks at you then, up at the clouds, and says, "The sky likes to test its work." She tosses you a coat. It lands in your hands with a papery thud. Damp already. It smells of pepper vinegar and smoke. You put it on. It's heavier than yesterday's breastplate, thicker, denser. Every inch has been lacquered until it shines like beetle shell. When you move, it makes the sound of crumpled leaves. Not loud, not metal, but present. The lacquer is boiled with chili and pine, she says, gesturing for you to follow. Keeps the bugs out. Keeps the rain from eating your ribs. You're not sure if she's joking. Her tone makes everything sound vaguely ceremonial. She leads you to a narrow archery range bordered by bamboo. Targets are drawn in ink on pale cloth fluttering at the far end. The paper armored dummies now sit on stools, their sleeves drooping, rain running in tiny rivulets off their shoulders like nervous sweat. She gestures to a bucket and a brush. You paint the exposed seams of one dummy's armor with fresh lacquer, feeling the viscosity under your fingers. It reminds you of molasses mixed with tree sap, sticky, unwilling to forgive mistakes. While you work, she talks. Tang soldiers used bamboo tiles. Japanese lords liked boiled silk, but here, paper. Why she squints at the sky? Because rain falls more often than arrows. It makes a strange kind of sense. Armor doesn't just need to stop a blade, it needs to endure. To survive the weather. To be worn again tomorrow. You lift one of the shoulder pieces and watch the water bead across the surface, never soaking through. When you flex it, the armor gives just slightly like a tree branch bending under snow. Historians still argue she murmurs whether these suits were truly battlefield gear or mostly used for parades and scouts. She smiles just barely. I say, what soldier cares for parades when soaked to the knees? You nod. Your knees are soaked already, but strangely your torso is dry, warm even. The armor holds in heat without smothering you. It's breathable, practical. The woman pulls a scroll from her belt. She unfolds it, revealing a diagram of overlapping paper layers with notations in faded ink. It looks like a flower pattern, spiraling circles that overlap more at the chest and spine, thinning near the joints. This pattern, she says, lets rain slide away from the heart. It's elegant. You wouldn't have guessed war could be this delicate. You spend the rest of the morning adjusting seams, repairing a sleeve, re-lacquering frayed edges, and walking slow circles around the yard. Every motion you make is measured. It has to be. Rain tests everything. By midday, the drizzle has faded into mist. The dummies steam gently in the returning light. The woman claps her hands once sharply. Lunch. You eat under the eaves. Steamed egg custard with pickled mustard greens and a bit of salted plum. The food is simple but warm and somehow perfect after hours of kneeling and sealing seams. You lean back against the wall, the lacquered coat squeaking slightly as you shift. It's funny, just days ago you would have laughed at the idea of paper armor. Now you feel oddly safe in it. Not invincible, just considered. And that's more than most armor can promise. A younger soldier passes nodding toward your coat. "Hold up in the rain?" he asks with a crooked grin. You nod. "Good," he says. "Because the smith's waiting." The smith. You weren't aware there was a smith. Apparently there is. And he doesn't deal in metal, but poetry. You follow the narrow stone path past a row of sleeping geese and a wall scrawled with drying laundry, some of which look suspiciously like armor under disguise. A few rice paper pauldrons are clipped alongside undergarments, flapping politely in the breeze like they don't want to draw attention. The building ahead doesn't look like a forge. There's no smoke curling from the roof, no hammer on anvil clatter. Instead, it resembles a tea house, wide eaves, elegant bamboo screens, and the faint aroma of ink and moss. You begin to wonder if this is a mistake, if perhaps someone misunderstood your next assignment. Then the door slides open. Inside it's warm, not fire warm, book warm. The kind of heat that comes from quiet rooms filled with old paper and minds that refuse to stop thinking. A soft humming rises from the back, and then you see him, the smith, except he's wearing spectacles and a robe flecked not with soot but with dried glue and faded brushstrokes. His hair is tied loosely with a strip of parchment, and his sleeves are so long they nearly dip into the inkstone beside him. He looks up. "You're the new one," he says, as if confirming something in a ledger only he can see. "Good. You can hold this." He shoves a stack of damp parchment into your hands. It's heavy, heavier than you'd expect paper to be. Each sheet is layered, coated, and marked with an intricate lattice of lines that looks like a cross between a war map and a sonnet. These are ribs, he adds casually. Spine plates, thigh guards, poetry in motion. He doesn't explain further. You set the stack down where he nods and watch as he takes one sheet, rolls it gently, and slides it into a curved wooden mold. He hums the entire time a strange melody that feels half lullaby, half marching song. The lacquer sings when it's warm, he murmurs, but only if you don't talk over it. You shut your mouth instinctively. The room is cluttered with paper molds, drying racks, and scrolls pinned to walls with sharpened bamboo quills. On a central table lies an incomplete breastplate, its layered structure more like origami than armor edges. Curling softly like the petals of a morning flower, he gestures for you to watch. With fingers stained in soot and glue, he dips a brush into a pot of something murky and green, then paints a precise line down the armor's inner seam. "Spinach ash," he says. Flexibility, and it keeps the beetles out. Of course. You lean closer, the inner layers of the breastplate reveal something else. Words, phrases, full poems, lines about wind and home and broken bowls. You blink. There's writing inside. He nods without looking up. "Every suit I make carries at least one verse. Some from me, some from the wearer, some older." He pauses and suddenly the room feels stiller than before. Historians still argue whether it was tradition or superstition, he says, but many of us quietly believed the armor remembered. You run your hand along the edge of a shoulder plate. The lacquer has been polished to a dull gleam, but just beneath the surface you can make out delicate strokes of ink characters no bigger than a sesame seed. One verse is signed by someone named Yunseo. Another simply reads, "Return with laughter." It hits you. Then this isn't just armor. It's memory. Memory worn and weathered and carried into fields where most things are forgotten. He turns to you suddenly. You write. You shrug. Maybe. Sometimes. When it rains. He tosses you a brush and slides a blank square of coated paper your way. Then leave something. Doesn't have to be clever. Just honest. So you do. You write a line. Simple. Something about waking up to the sound of glue being stirred. It's not profound, but it's yours. He nods as you finish and slides it into the breastplate like it's always belonged there. He doesn't praise it. He doesn't need to. The act is enough. The lacquer must rest, he explains, and the armor must hang like laundry that dreams of war. That's how he says it. No irony. You help him pin the piece to the drying rack by the window. Outside, the geese have returned to muttering softly, and the sun dapples through bamboo slats onto the table beside you. He points at a small cupboard near the door. Take the inkstone from the bottom shelf. It's chipped, but it belonged to a poet who once blocked a spear with his notebook. You can't tell if he's joking. You hope he's not. You pick it up carefully. It's smooth and cool in your hand, the chip along the edge shaped oddly like a crescent moon. You tuck it into your robe. Outside, the rain has stopped completely. And the armor, it still hums quietly behind you, drying in the window light, each poem softening into lacquered silence. Tomorrow you'll march for the first time, and your armor, your poem will go with you. The sun rises over the training fields like a slowly reheated rice cake, warm, comforting, and slightly sticky. A haze clings to the grass, and the air smells faintly of peppery lacquer, boiled barley, and something vaguely floral, maybe honeysuckle, maybe laundry. You're standing in formation, not tightly packed like rows of spearmen. This is more casual, sleepy almost. A dozen recruits all dressed in armor that looks like ceremonial robes at first glance until you hear it. That sound again, the whispering rustle. Paper. A full suit now rests against your shoulders, hugging your ribs with its many folds stitched with threads so fine they vanish into the lacquer. The breastplate is layered with 7 sheets, your own words hidden beneath the third. The pauldrons extend just enough to brush your earlobes when you turn your head. It smells faintly of glue ink and the poem you wrote yesterday. A long curved sword is offered to you not sharp, just for show. It balances lightly in your hand, and when you move, your armor doesn't groan. It doesn't clink. It sighs, like a library being dusted. You march, well shuffle. You've never trained in armor before, and the feeling is more theatrical than heroic. Your boots catch on uneven stones. The soldier to your left sneezes and causes a minor panic when his scroll pouch pops open. It's not glamorous, but it's real. You walk in pairs across the courtyard, then through the village edge, following a dirt path that curves lazily along a ridge. There's no shouting, no drums, just the soft rhythm of paper armor brushing against itself and the occasional murmur from a crow perched along the gate. Your instructor today is a middle-aged man with the posture of someone who has accepted back pain as a life companion. His helmet is papier-mâché, molded with such precision it resembles polished bronze. He walks with a limp and a staff, not because he needs it, but because it makes him look slightly more mystical. You'll notice he begins without preamble, that no one here looks heroic. He's not wrong. Your squad looks like a group of well-read clerks on their way to a paper folding contest. But that's the point he adds. A feather doesn't look like a sword, but drop it the right way and it still cuts the wind. There's a pause. Okay, he concedes that sounded better in my head. You march a little longer. The field opens up into a wide clearing. Bamboo poles mark out makeshift enemies' targets painted in faded red with angry brows and bulging eyes. You're instructed to run. You hesitate. The armor doesn't. You lunge forward and to your surprise, your body doesn't complain. The suit bends, breathes, flexes with your movement. It doesn't weigh you down, it glides. Each step is echoed by the soft, papery brushing of your sleeves and the whisper of your shin guard shifting with the rhythm of your stride. It's not quite like wearing clothing. It's more like wearing intention. The painted targets grow closer. You raise your wooden blade and swing not fast, not fierce, but decisively. The blade meets the bamboo with a dull thud. You miss by a finger's width. Your partner laughs. The instructor does not. Battle, he says, is made of small margins. He crouches beside the dummy and points to the slight tear where someone else's blade had struck earlier. Just above the heart, a red line has begun to bleed across the paper armor worn by the pole. Look, he says. It held. He peels back the paper gently. The layers beneath remain intact. Just the top had torn. This is the brilliance. Let them break the surface. Let them think they've broken you. You practice until your legs ache. Short sprints, defensive rolls, quick turns. With every motion, the armor creaks and whispers, but never cracks. You begin to understand why messengers wore it, why scouts lightly armed could dart through enemy lines in suits like yours. Not invincible, invisible. That's the real power. You pause by a tree, catching your breath. Sweat gathers beneath the collar of your suit, but it doesn't stick or chafe. Instead, the layers draw it away. Someone thought of that long ago. A soldier beside you lifts his sleeve and shows you a hidden fold tucked inside is a pressed flower stitched carefully where no sword would reach. Wife's favorite, he says. Makes the armor lucky. You nod, but wonder if it's the flower or the thought that does the protecting. As the sun rises higher, casting golden light across the hills, the instructor calls for one last lap. He doesn't shout, just lifts his hand. And so you run again, not fast, but fluid. Feather light. You run in armor that folds, bends, and remembers. Tomorrow you'll meet the tailor who stitched your sleeve, but she's already seen you from behind her curtain of drying ink. The tailor's workshop is tucked at the end of a narrow alley hidden between two low walls strung with drying ink scrolls and the faintest scent of toasted sesame oil. You nearly miss it. The doorway isn't marked. No sign, no bell. Just a faded red tassel hanging beside a bamboo screen that moves like someone exhaling. You step inside and immediately feel the temperature drop. The air is thick with the scent of wet ink pressed cloth and something else. Lavender, maybe Nombre plum blossom soap, the kind you remember from a dream you once forgot. There's a rustle behind the paper partition, and then she appears. The tailor. She's not old, not young, somewhere in the middle where confidence wears as easily as silk. Her hair is pulled into a knot so tight it might hum if plucked. She walks like someone who measures things in steps, not seconds. Without a word, she points to a stool. You sit. She circles once, then twice. Examining your armor like a librarian checks a suspiciously dog-eared book. She pauses at your right sleeve, pinches a seam between two fingers, and snorts softly through her nose. Too eager, she says, "Whoever stitched this thought battle was a sprint." You're about to explain that it was you, partly anyway, but she's already reaching into a drawer and pulling out a coil of thread as fine as spiderweb. She threads a needle in one smooth motion and begins unstitching your arm. Not painfully, not roughly, just efficiently. As she works, you glance around the room. Every surface is covered with scraps of armor. Not full pieces, just parts. Sleeves, cuffs, collars, and pinned to each a tiny slip of parchment. Not labels, not measurements. Secrets. You lean closer to one. Only folds where the truth bends. Another, do not trust a man whose armor is louder than his voice. They're not instructions, they're stories. She puts one in every seam, says a whispery voice from behind a curtain. A young apprentice peeks out, eyes wide, fingers smudged with ink. Says it gives the piece a soul. The tailor doesn't deny it. She simply knots the thread and smooths the sleeve with the side of her hand. Armor must fit more than flesh, she says. It must fit memory, regret, hope. She gestures for you to stand. You do. The sleeve now bends more easily. When you lift your arm, it doesn't catch or crumple. It flows. See, she says. Now you can reach without apology. She steps aside and reveals a long mirror, an old one warped slightly with corners gilded in bronze filigree. You study your reflection. The armor gleams softly in the light edges, dulled with use, joints stitched so cleanly they look grown. And there on the inside of your newly mended sleeve, you spot it, a line of ink, tiny, faint, folded just beneath the seam. You can barely read it, but it says, "To protect something small becomes something quiet." You don't ask if it's about you, maybe it always was. She hands you a small roll of thread wrapped in rice paper. "For when it tears again," she says. "And it will." You nod. The curtain rustles again and another apprentice shuffles out holding a paper gauntlet. He looks terrified, probably stitched it himself. You catch a glimpse of his handwriting inked on the inside flap, something about a borrowed hat and a runaway chicken. It's oddly moving. You leave the workshop quietly. The air outside feels warmer now, as if your sleeve is trapping something new. Not just heat, but permission to move differently, to carry something unspoken. You walk slowly back through the alley, catching snippets of sound, the distant clang of a bell, the murmured laughter of two guards sharing pickled radish, the familiar papery rustle of armor being fitted just out of view. You round the corner and there's the instructor again, leaning against a post, chewing what looks like plum skin. He eyes your sleeve. "Got the tailor's blessing, did you?" he says. You nod. "She stitched my wedding vows into my belt," once he adds, staring off toward the hills. "Then sewed the belt shut." You smile, unsure whether that's a joke or a confession. "Tomorrow you'll train under moonlight. But tonight your sleeve rustles differently when you move. Like it knows something you don't. Yet." The lanterns are lit before the sun even touches the horizon, not all at once, just one by the main gate, then another by the well, and a third tucked under the eaves of the barracks. Pools of soft golden light slowly dot the courtyard like puddles of melted fireflies. You're summoned by a short whistle, the kind a tea kettle might make if it were trying not to wake the neighbors. Tonight is drill night, not the loud kind, not the sort with shouting officers and synchronized chants. This is the quiet kind, the kind that trains muscle and breath, the kind you do while the rest of the world sleeps, because that's when most bad decisions happen between midnight and dawn. Your armor is cool from hanging by the window all afternoon. It smells faintly of lacquer plum blossoms and the crisp sweetness of nighttime air. The sleeve the tailor fixed still whispers when you move the inked words inside, warming slightly against your skin like a kept secret. You gather at the far end of the training field, a dozen of you silhouettes more than soldiers. No torches, just a cluster of candles stuck into upturned bowls of sand flickering against the wind. It's enough light to see your feet. Barely. The instructor from this morning returns, still limping, still unimpressed. He carries a thin branch instead of a staff tonight. You'll see why he says vaguely, "Draw," he says. You reach for your practice sword. "Now forget it," he adds. "We don't use weapons tonight." You pause confused. He grins just enough to seem like someone who once had a sense of humor, but locked it away for emergencies. Tonight we train your armor. You're guided through a series of slow movements. Step forward, turn, duck, twist. The armor must move with you, not after you. And most importantly, it mustn't speak. If your sleeves rustle, your shoulders drag, or your breastplate creaks too loudly, he swats you with the branch. Not hard. Just enough to say, try again. The drills continue hour after hour, candlelight dancing along your sleeves as you pivot and kneel and stretch. You begin to learn the difference between loud silence and useful silence. Useful silence bends at the waist. Useful silence exhales when you land. Useful silence doesn't crackle or squeak when you kneel to hide behind tall grass at midnight. One of the younger recruits steps wrong. His pauldron lets out a long, sticky rip as the lacquered seam separates. The instructor pauses, sighs, and says, "His shoulder's a liability," then almost kindly adds, "but only until he stitches it back up." You begin again and again. The moon rises full and pale. Mist creeps along the edge of the stone wall like a cautious house cat. You can hear frogs now somewhere far off singing in rhythmic chirps. Even your own breath has slowed into something meditative. Your body aches, not sharply, just enough to remind you it's been working. Still you move, step, pivot, pause. Each motion leaves a tiny echo in the soil. Each turn folds your armor like a story reread too many times. Familiar now. Trusted. There's a moment just after midnight when the drills stop. The instructor walks among you, doesn't speak, just adjusts a collar here, presses a seam, flat there, brushes dust off a sleeve. It feels more like being tended to by a gardener than a drill master. He returns to the candle bowls, picks up one, holds it out. "Take it," he says. You do. You'll carry it back. No lid, no windshield. Just walk. No drips. You raise an eyebrow. He taps your chest plate gently. If your armor doesn't help you walk softly, what good is it? So you walk. Not far, just to the far edge of camp and back. But it's enough to realize how loud your thoughts have been. The candlelight dances against your chest. Your sleeve sways. The hem of your coat brushes your shin with a sigh. You return with flame intact. Most of the others do too. One doesn't. A single drip lands on the toe of his boot. He shrugs. The instructor shrugs back. Try again tomorrow. And that's the tone of this place. No screaming, no disgrace, just rhythm. You lie down that night beneath the slanted roof of your quarters, your armor folded beside you. It hums faintly in the dark, still warm from your body heat. You press your palm against the breastplate and feel the tiniest give-like paper reshaping itself around memory. Tomorrow you'll meet someone who claims your armor used to be banned because it was once a book and someone didn't want the words getting out. You wake to the smell of steamed barley and someone gently whistling an off-key tune about pickled cucumbers. The kind of tune that sticks to the side of your thoughts like sesame oil to the edge of a bowl. Your armor lies neatly folded beside you, still a little warm from your skin, still smelling faintly of paper and sweat and quiet effort. You reach for it and your hand pauses just as your fingertips graze the sleeve. There's something tucked inside. Not a flower, not a thread spool, a scroll, small, rolled tight, bound with red string and stained in one corner like it once survived a rainstorm. You glance around, no one nearby, just the old orange cat dozing under the awning tail, twitching like it's solving a slow-moving mystery in its sleep. You unroll the scroll. The script is old, curved, formal, elegant, not the rushed strokes of military orders, but the practiced hand of a scholar. It begins like a story. This armor once sang on the shelf of a forbidden library. Your eyes widen just slightly. Below the line is a map, not a full one, just a fragment. A cluster of dots marked with tiny brush strokes, temples, roads, river bends, and a single inked kanji meaning burned. The scroll ends with another line barely legible. If you wear these words, remember some truths, prefer to whisper. A tap on your shoulder makes you flinch. It's the monk. You've seen him around, always barefoot robes, too short for his height sleeves, perpetually ink stained. He's holding a tray of tea and looking at you like you just read his diary. You found one. He says, amused. You blink. You put it there. He sips the tea and doesn't answer. Instead, he sits beside you, legs crossed joints, popping like wet paper peeling from a board. This paper armor, he says, wasn't always made for soldiers. He waves vaguely toward the field. Long ago, we made it to hide books. Forbidden ones. The kind that made bureaucrats itchy. They thought if they burned the libraries, that would be the end of things. He taps your sleeve with a long, calloused finger. So we wore the libraries instead. You look down at your breastplate, he continues, folded the pages flat, layered them with glue and lacquer, covered them with false brushwork so no one would suspect a thing. He leans in, whispering now. Some of us still wear the original texts. You can't tell if he's teasing. But wouldn't the lacquer you start trap the words he finishes? Yes. But sometimes that's the only way to keep them safe. Better entombed than erased. He leans back, sighing like a man who's told this story a dozen times and still isn't sure whether he believes it. Historians still argue, he says, whether any of the original scroll armor has survived. Then he looks straight at your chest. But I think you're wearing one. You look down again. The armor does feel denser there. As if it carries more than just glue and bark. As if it's holding its breath. He finishes his tea and stands. Wear it well. Words deserve a gentle journey. Before you can ask anything else, he's gone. You carry the scroll in your sleeve all morning, feeling the weight of it against your arm like a second pulse. As you walk the training grounds, you start noticing details you hadn't before. Tiny brush marks along the hem of someone's collar, a row of pinprick holes in another's sleeve, like something was stitched there and removed. You begin to wonder how many scrolls are out there, how many armors are books in disguise. At midday, you're assigned to a quiet patrol around the northern slope, a casual loop to clear your head, your officer calls it. The breeze is soft, the sky a pale watercolor blue, and the paper on your shoulders rustles like dry reeds. Halfway through the circuit, you sit under a willow and unroll the scroll again. The ink has bled slightly at the edge, forming ghost words you can't quite read. You wonder who wrote it, what it meant to them, whether they ever meant for it to be worn into battle or just remembered. You fold it carefully and tuck it back into your sleeve next to the tailor's line. 2 secrets now, one sewn, one written, both carried on your skin. And tomorrow you'll feel a third, but this one comes not from a monk or a tailor. It comes from a poem you'll wear beneath your chest, one that warms you in the cold. It's cold this morning, not breath-clouding frostbitten cold, but that deep creeping kind, the kind that settles behind your ears and in the joints of your fingers, the kind that makes the paper armor feel less like armor and more like a stack of yesterday's laundry you forgot to bring in. You tug your collar up and keep moving, boots creaking slightly on the gravel path that winds down from the temple slope. The wind's picked up too. It's the sort of breeze that carries secrets across rooftops and gets stuck in the corners of old maps. Your shoulders ache where the lacquer has stiffened overnight, and you're beginning to wonder if paper armor was such a good idea after all. That's when the quartermaster finds you. Well, ambushes you more like. He's short-shaped like a soup ladle and speaks with the persistent certainty of someone who's absolutely right about everything, even if no one asked. His hair is arranged into a top knot that defies wind. He squints at you like he already knows you forgot something. Too cold, he asks, not kindly. You nod, hugging yourself slightly. The armor's stiff. Your elbows don't want to bend. He grunts, waves a hand, and disappears behind a partition of reed mats and drying boots. A moment later, he returns holding what looks like a ragged vest, patchy stained stitched in uneven rows. He thrusts it into your hands. It's warm. It's buzzing. You turn it over and realize the entire inside is covered in ink. Brushed characters, dense overlapping verses packed like bricks, hundreds of lines swirling together like a miniature library was pressed into this vest. This, he says, jabbing a finger toward the ink, is insulation. You blink. Words are insulation. Good ones are, he mutters. Bad ones let the wind right through. He grabs the vest, shoves it into your chest armor before you can object, and starts sealing the edges with a thick brush of lacquer. The warmth spreads instantly, like a cup of ginger tea slipped beneath your ribs. You want heat, he continues. You use poems. Ink catches warmth, holds it. Ask any monk. You remember the one from yesterday, the scroll in your sleeve, the secret line, the ink just barely breathing through the lacquer. Maybe this isn't as strange as it sounds. The quartermaster taps the chest plate, now cradling your ribs. These lines here, he says, are from a poem about a fox who fell asleep in a library. Warmest vest I've ever made. He steps back and nods once proud. Try moving. You do. It's easier now. The paper flexes more willingly. The warmth lingers. There's a strange kind of calm in your torso, like you're wrapped in a very opinionated blanket. When you inhale, the ink even smells faintly of pine and smoke. You ask him if every soldier gets one. He snorts. Only the quiet ones. Loud soldiers don't deserve poems. You take that as a compliment. As the day goes on, the wind sharpens. Others begin noticing your comfort. A few shoot jealous glances. One attempts to stuff cabbage leaves into his sleeves. It ends poorly. Your vest holds firm. Mid-afternoon, while watching a sparring match, you catch another line inside your armor, faded now along the inner right edge. Winter is patient, so be warmer than it is. You smile. Later, while kneeling by the fire pit for evening tea duty, you lean forward and feel the warmth surge through your ribs again. Not heat, exactly just presence. Like the armor is remembering something cozy on your behalf. Historians still argue whether these ink vests were practical innovations or spiritual indulgences, whether the warmth came from the layered cloth and resin, or the belief sewn into them. Some claim it's superstition. Others point to ancient field notes that mention the humming breastplates. You're not sure, but you know one thing: you're warmer. And your armor no longer feels like a burden. It feels like a book. Tomorrow you'll glimpse a regiment that doesn't speak at all. Not because they can't, but because silence is how their armor works. Evening draws in like ink spreading through rice paper, slow, certain, and utterly quiet. The sun hasn't fully set, but the light has taken on that muted blue tone that makes every shadow look like a person just out of reach. You're helping fold the tea towels in the supply tent when the officer with the crow feather fan appears beside you without warning. He's one of those people who seems to exist entirely on the edges of scenes, never central, never loud, just present. He says one thing, come, and so you do. You follow him down a side path through the ginkgo trees where golden leaves cover the ground like a forgotten festival. The path curves behind the barracks, behind the gardens, and into an alcove you didn't know existed. And there, waiting in absolute stillness, is the Queen's hidden regiment. You've heard the rumors, everyone has. A unit that doesn't speak, that trains under moonlight, that vanishes into forests like breath on a mirror. Some said they weren't real. Others swore they were ghosts. But they're here now. And they are very real. 10 figures. All in armor so precisely fitted it looks like they've grown into it. No sharp corners. No clunky edges. Every fold follows the lines of their bodies. The lacquer has been tinted a soft grayish blue, barely visible in shadow. Their faces are calm, not stern, not vacant, just deeply focused. Like monks preparing for a ritual, none of them look at you. Their commander, a woman whose expression has been carved by decades of deliberate choices, nods once. You step forward. The officer with the crow feather fan whispers, they don't speak during drills, and neither will you. He places a folded cloth in your hand. It's a blindfold. You hesitate. He nods toward the group. You put it on. The world goes dark, but not silent. The moment your sight disappears, your ears wake up. You hear feet shift slightly in dirt. You hear the faintest flutter of armor sleeves brushing hips. You hear someone inhale. Then movement. The drill begins. You don't know the steps. There are no verbal cues, no signals you can see, but the air around you moves, not like wind, like choreography. You feel someone pass inches from your shoulder, another ducking near your elbow, not a single sound louder than rustling parchment, and somehow your body starts to follow. Not perfectly, but slowly. You step when they step, you pivot, you feel a pattern like your body is being folded into something larger than you. Minutes pass, then more. You lose track of time, then a hand on your arm, gently guiding you out of the circle. The blindfold is lifted. You blink into the lantern-lit grove and realize you've been sweating. The commander meets your eyes. Hers are quiet, not unreadable, just unread. She gives you a small nod, then turns away. The crow feather officer smiles faintly. Their armor, he says softly, is stitched to their breath. You're not sure what that means, but it feels true. Each of their suits is lighter than yours. The lacquer thinner. The paper layers more tightly pressed. When they move, their armor barely whispers. The officer continues. It's said that the queen once wore a version herself. During the drought wars, rode straight through enemy lines dressed as a courier. The only reason she made it through, he flicks the fan once. Silence. You look back at the regiment. They're kneeling now, heads bowed, not in submission, but in preparation. This is how they rest. Silent, folded, still. Historians still argue the officer adds whether the hidden regiment ever fought at all, or if they were simply legend symbols of grace under fire. Then he leans in whispering in your ear, but if you ever find yourself lost in fog and hear nothing but breathing, it might be them. He's gone before you can answer. You walk back to camp alone. The ginkgo leaves glow faintly in the dark, and your armor makes the softest crinkle as you move. It sounds louder now. You're aware of every step, every fold, every breath. That night you lie awake listening to the wind, to your heartbeat, to the memory of silence shaped like 10 soldiers who never spoke. Tomorrow you'll see crows fighting over lacquer scraps, and learn why they're the best eavesdroppers in camp. Morning in the armory yard smells like damp paper-boiled millet and mischief. Not danger, just the kind of mischief that tends to involve unguarded food, someone's missing sandal, and a suspicious bird. You arrive early today tasked with transferring dried armor plates from the upper racks to the finishing tables. It's peaceful at first. Quiet steps, the gentle tap of lacquered edges against wooden trays, the occasional snap of a rice cracker breaking in someone's mouth across the yard. And then you hear it. Caw. Not the majestic kind, more of a judgmental sound like someone trying to cough up a critique. You glance up. A crow, sleek, glossy, and utterly unimpressed, is perched on the upper rack, poking at a still-drying shoulder plate with practiced indifference. When you wave your arms at it, it doesn't fly away. It just tilts its head like it's considering whether you're worth mocking. You climb the ladder. Halfway up, another crow appears, then another. 3 now, hopping along the bamboo slats like they've just inherited the place. Careful calls a voice below. They've got a taste for fermented glue. It's the old man with the scroll belt, the one who always seems to be refolding the same piece of parchment, but never actually finishes. He chuckles. They're not trying to ruin your armor, they're reading it. You glance back at the birds. One pecks gently at the corner of a chest plate. Not viciously, just a single tap, then a pause, like it's savoring something invisible. They listen during painting. The old man continues. To the verses, the instructions, the secrets. Then they peck at what they remember. That sounds ridiculous, which is probably why it feels true. You finish gathering the pieces, carefully scooting the birds away, though one refuses to budge from its post. It simply sidesteps you and glares. Back on the ground, the rest of the day is spent inspecting the armor for damage. Each plate is held to the light, turned slowly, brushed clean. You're taught to look not just for tears or bubbles, but for pecks. Tiny ones. Crows, you're told, have excellent taste in lacquer, but more importantly, they remember things. They don't just mimic voices a guard tells you during lunch. They mimic moments. They'll repeat the way a scribe walked, the noise of a crying officer, the silence before a message was delivered. He pops a roasted chestnut into his mouth, chews, and adds one crow once repeated an entire poem from a helmet. You stare. He shrugs. The armor was burned later, not because of the poem, because of what it revealed. He doesn't say what it revealed. He doesn't have to. Historians still argue he says mouth half full whether the crows were trained spies or just feathered accidents. You look over toward the trees lining the edge of camp. A dozen black shapes roost in the branches watching everything, every movement, every fold of armor being sewn, every whispered correction. One of them squawks a perfect imitation of the quartermaster clearing his throat. You nearly drop your bowl. That afternoon, a younger recruit swears he saw a crow mimic the general's footsteps. 3 light taps, 1 dragging toe, and 3 officers immediately turned their heads in unison expecting to be scolded. They weren't, but the crow looked pleased. In the evening, you return the last of the armor plates to their shelves. One has a feather stuck to the inside seam. You pull it free only to find a scrap of torn parchment beneath it. The ink is smudged, but still legible. Feathers know what paper forgets. You glance up at the rafters. One of the crows is perched just above you, watching, not menacingly, just curiously. You nod once. It doesn't nod back, but you imagine that if it could, it would say, "Pay better attention." As the lanterns flicker to life, the birds begin to shift, flapping lightly to higher branches, making room for the incoming dusk. The yard quiets. Somewhere a scribe sneezes dramatically. A few crows echo it perfectly a moment later. You smile. Tomorrow you'll meet a man who recites philosophy instead of orders. But tonight your dreams will be full of wings and paper, and the faintest sound of beaks tapping ink. You're halfway through morning tea duty when someone clears his throat with such exaggerated grace that your cup nearly jumps out of your hands. You turn to find a tall, lean man standing in the doorway of the courtyard wearing a belt that looks suspiciously like a rolled-up scroll and a confused expression that belongs more in a library than on a battlefield. He introduces himself with a deep bow, then forgets to give his name. Someone behind you mutters, "Oh no, it's him." The man doesn't seem to notice. He adjusts his spectacles, yes, spectacles smudged and clearly too heavy for his narrow face, and then launches into a gentle monologue about the metaphysical implications of defensive garments. He uses the word ontology before breakfast, which feels rude. He's your instructor for the day. His assignment tactical philosophy, his approach completely unarmed, both figuratively and literally. You follow him reluctantly to the central yard where other recruits are already stretching and quietly regretting their decisions. The man pulls out a battered book bound in pressed mulberry paper and reads aloud from it while pacing. The armor we wear, he begins, is not to hide our bodies but to declare them negotiable. You blink. Someone coughs. He continues undeterred. To protect is not to resist. It is to postpone. Postpone the blade, the arrow, the misunderstanding of one's existence. He claps once softly like clapping for a very polite poem. Now run. And so you run. It's a light jog around the courtyard, but every time someone turns a corner, he yells a quote from Mencius or mutters something about epistemology. One poor recruit trips when the instructor unexpectedly shouts, "Virtue is shaped like armor." Later, while you're catching your breath under a persimmon tree, he kneels beside you and taps the hem of your sleeve. This fold, he says, is illogical, but beautiful. He smiles. That's important. You begin to understand his role not to teach you how to fight, but why you wear what you wear. Why paper? Why ink? Why words matter more than edges? He pulls a page from his scroll belt and shows it to you. It's an old diagram, an armor layout from the Goryeo dynasty. Not just structural, poetic. Each panel is labeled not with its physical location, but with emotional metaphors. Chest plate, the place of apologies. Right shoulder, regret once carried. Left thigh, dreams postponed for others. You look up, he's watching you expectantly. Historians still argue he says whether this was a field manual or a love letter. You ask what he thinks. He shrugs. What's the difference? He rises and begins pacing again, weaving between students like a reed in the wind. War is not won by iron. It is endured by memory, and memory is foldable. That afternoon, you find him bent over a stack of armor scraps, rearranging them on the ground like puzzle pieces. He pauses to read poetry to them as if the pieces might decide how best to reassemble themselves. A scribe passes and asks if he'll be joining the archery drill. He looks up confused. Me? Oh no, I've never drawn a bow in my life. Then why are you here? The scribe asks, annoyed. He grins. To be worn, of course. It doesn't make sense, but it also sort of does. At evening meal, he sits beside you and asks if your armor has grown heavier or lighter. You think for a moment and realize it hasn't changed weight, but it moves differently. It expects things now, like breath and pause and decision. He nods satisfied. Then it's learning. Before parting, he pulls something from his sleeve and presses it into your palm. A strip of paper, 7 brushstrokes. It reads, "To wear armor is to hold a question without answering it." You fold it carefully and tuck it into your collar. Tomorrow you'll help lacquer helmets while rain drums softly overhead, and a lullaby about typhoons will remind you just how many layers a soldier carries. The rain returns just after dawn, soft, steady, almost thoughtful in its pacing. You wake to the sound of it tapping across the tiled roof like a practiced musician warming up. Not loud, not cold, just there, like breath fogging a mirror. You shuffle out from under your blanket and feel the chill curl around your ankles. Outside, the world is wrapped in pale gray. The courtyard is empty. The stones glisten. Water drips from every edge, down every line of bamboo, and from the drying racks where armor now hangs in stillness shimmering faintly. Someone hands you a brush before you've even finished tying your robe. You're on helmets, she says. No explanation, no instructions, just a glance toward the lacquer hut where a low fire smolders and the scent of tree sap and vinegar fills the air like incense at a shrine. The hut is warmer than you expect. The walls are thick with old drips, long trails of hardened lacquer curled like blackened candle wax. Shelves stacked with helmet shells line the walls. Each one is made of the same pressed mulberry paper curved into half domes, layered and lacquered, then set to cure in the heat of the hearth. Your job, the third coating. You're shown how to dip the wide flat brush into a pot of resin deep reddish brown, thick as honey, and spread it slowly across the surface of each helmet. Not too fast, not too thick. Lacquer is a patient art, like storytelling or sleeping. The first helmet is slightly uneven and your brush leaves tiny ridges. You frown. A woman beside you chuckles gently. You're thinking too hard, she says. She hums as she paints. A tune so slow and simple, it sounds like it's been passed down from rain cloud to roof tile. You pause listening. Song of the Southern Typhoon, she says without looking up. My grandmother sang it during floods. She dips her brush again. You find yourself picking up the rhythm, not just of the tune, but of her strokes. Brush pause, brush hum. She moves like she's explaining something to the armor, not demanding anything, just offering. After your fifth helmet, the lacquer begins to respond. It shines just a little, a soft gleam, not glossy like metal, but warm, like the glow of oiled parchment under candlelight. You glance at one particularly old helmet on the top shelf. It's cracked at the rim, a deep gash mended with golden lacquer. Along the edge, words have been etched in ink and then sealed beneath the final coat. You read them slowly. Rain does not ask permission, neither should you. You run your fingers across the edge. The words are barely raised, but they're there. Historians still argue, says the woman beside you, whether our helmets were meant to intimidate or to reassure. She shrugs. Personally, I think they were for remembering songs. She gestures to another stack of drying shells. Each has a different mark on the inside, a line of poetry, a sketch of a mountain, a single character pressed into the pulp before curing. No two are the same, she says. We let the rain tell us what to write. You laugh softly thinking she's joking. She's not. You look again at the helmets waiting for their turn. Some are thicker, some curve slightly off center. One even has what looks like a pressed leaf trapped between the layers, its veins still visible through the lacquer. These aren't just helmets, you murmur. They never were, she replies. You finish your batch just before lunch, arms sore, fingers stained, and your face pleasantly warmed from the fire. You've lacquered 8 helmets, all with slightly different brush patterns. You hum the typhoon song under your breath as you work. You don't even notice the crows peeking in from the rafters. One of them caws softly when you pause off key, but somehow in rhythm. You offer it a nod. As you leave, the woman stops you and tucks a tiny scroll into your hand. For your helmet, she says. You unroll it later in your sleeping quarters. It's a lullaby. Just 8 lines. Simple, soft, written in a looping hand. You read it once, then again, then tuck it gently inside the rim of your helmet, sealing it beneath the padding with a strip of glue. Your helmet hums now when you pick it up. Not loudly, just enough. Tomorrow, a boy will launch part of your armor into the sky, and you'll learn that even in war, there's room for play. The sky is scrubbed clean the next morning, pale blue, soft-edged clouds like rice puffs scattered above the hills. The rain has passed, leaving everything slightly soggy, slightly shining. You step into the courtyard with a bowl of warm porridge in hand and nearly drop it when something sails overhead. Not a bird, not a scroll, a sleeve, your sleeve, or something that looks suspiciously like a detached sleeve of paper armor flying high above the treetops, tethered to a long thread of silk and mischief. Let it catch the wind, someone shouts. Don't fight it, you look toward the voice. A boy, maybe 12, grinning like he's just invented clouds. His hair is tied in a crooked bun. He holds a spool of string in one hand and a stick in the other, using both with the intensity of someone performing heart surgery in mid-air. Your armor sleeve dances in the wind, swooping and fluttering, occasionally twisting like it wants to become a bird. It levels out. Climbs. You rush over. Is that you begin? Yes, he says proudly. Your old sleeve. You blink. Why is it? Flying testing, he says, as if the answer is obvious. You crouch beside him, unsure whether to be offended or impressed. The boy hands you the string. You want it to catch, he explains. But not tear. If it tears, it wasn't pressed right. If it pulls too hard, the glue's too thick. Wind finds mistakes faster than swords do. You squint up at your fluttering former sleeve. It's doing well. Better than you expected. It flutters, yes, but it doesn't flap wildly. It dips gracefully, folds into itself during sharp turns, then regains shape with surprising smoothness. How often do you do this, you ask? Every week, he says. More if it's windy, less if the crows get in the way. Of course. He tugs once on the line and the sleeve spirals before settling back into a gentle glide. You stare transfixed. This is armor as aeronautics. He gestures toward a table nearby where more pieces of armor lie straps bracers, even an entire pauldron, each with small kite strings attached. Some are folded like fans, others reinforced with slats of thin bamboo. You pick up one and immediately recognize a faint line of ink just beneath the top layer. What bends today will float tomorrow. That's mine, the boy says, beaming. I wrote it before I knew how to spell float. He points to another wind has no loyalty, but excellent taste. Historians still argue he adds with an unbothered shrug whether wind testing armor was practical or just a poetic excuse to slack off. He grins. I think it's both. You spend the rest of the morning with him, letting more pieces fly. A bracer arcs into the air and dives too sharply, snapping at the seam. He frowns but doesn't panic. Good to know, he says, already planning the next patch. A group of soldiers pause to watch as one chest flap rises, twirling like a leaf on a breeze. One of them claps. The others shake their heads, but none of them look away. The wind grows stronger around midday, and for a moment your sleeve begins to drift too far. You brace for a break, but it holds, and returns. When you reel it in, the paper is soft but intact, damp at the edges from sky mist. You hold it close and feel a subtle vibration like the wind left behind a little part of itself in the folds. The boy offers to reattach it to your training armor. It's better now, he says. It knows things. You don't question that. He adds a tiny brush stroke on the inner seam before stitching it back in place. You don't read it right away. You wait until he's gone. Then when you're alone, you look. It says this one danced with clouds. You run your finger over the line and think, so have I. That night the sky remains clear, but you swear you still hear fluttering. Not wings. Not flags, just echoes of sleeves brushing sky. Tomorrow you'll follow the sound of humming parchment to a temple corner, and discover that some armor remembers who wore it last. The sun is already high when you're sent to the temple annex, a quiet job. They said something about organizing donation records and sweeping the eastern corridor. Light work, paperwork, nothing dangerous. You step past the lacquered gate into cool shadow. The temple smells like pine ash and old sandalwood, and the stone floors still hold the chill of morning. Incense smoke curls in slow ribbons from a corner shrine, drifting through sunlight like a memory walking barefoot. You're halfway down the east hall when you hear it. A hum, not music, not wind. A low rhythmic vibration like someone singing without sound or parchment exhaling in its sleep. You pause. It's coming from behind a tapestry, an old one sun-faded, embroidered with cranes and clouds, and a row of distant mountains so stylized they look like they're yawning. You ease the fabric aside. Behind it is a scroll, mounted vertically taller than you, sealed in a glass frame. It's a suit of paper armor, flattened, pressed into a long parchment, and hung like a forgotten decree. You step closer. Its surface is worn, the lacquer dulled to a soft sheen. Ink strokes swirl along the chest plate, faint, but still legible. Not one poem, dozens. Layered, overwritten, scribbled in margins, circles. Tiny characters curling around the edges like moss. As your breath nears the scroll, the hum deepens. Not louder, just closer. You reach out and place your fingertips gently against the glass. tense. The humming intensifies not through your ears, but through your bones. It's not music, you realize, it's voice. Not speaking, not exactly, remembering. A small plaque at the bottom reads, "Worn at Jong Valley. Returned alone, the rest remembered in verse." You stare. A monk enters quietly from the side room, doesn't seem surprised to find you here. He carries a brush and a bucket of tea-colored water clearly meant for scrubbing the flagstones. He notices your expression and stops. "You heard it," he asks. You nod. He sets the bucket down and kneels beside you, careful not to disturb the light pooling across the floor. "She wore it for 3 campaigns," he says. The last one she walked out with arrowheads still stuck in the sleeves. Didn't remove them, just lacquered over, said they'd keep her humble. You blink. She never wrote about the fighting, he adds. Only what she saw on the road. A crooked dog, a ruined bridge, a bowl of sweet rice stolen by crows. He gestures toward the scroll. She wrote it all here. You ask softly why it hums. He doesn't answer at first. Then some armor doesn't forget. You sit there a while. The hum settles into your chest. You find yourself reading the ink phrases jumping out like birds startled into flight. Do not trust mud without stones. Even rain stops to listen. I lost a sandal but found a proverb. You feel a sudden warmth in your ribs and realize your own armor has begun to echo. Not humming exactly, but responding, like a chord in tune with another. The monk smiles gently. Historians still argue whether armor can carry memory. He leans in, but you already know the answer. You stay until the light shifts. When you rise to leave, the hum softens like a nod. You bow awkwardly but sincerely and step back into the corridor. Outside, the breeze is gentle. Leaves scatter. A piece of straw clings to your sleeve and you don't brush it off. You return to camp with the sense that something just followed you. Not a ghost, just a memory. Tomorrow you'll stand before an archer, and he will aim not at you but through your doubts. The archer is waiting for you before sunrise. He stands at the far end of the southern field, feet planted bow in hand expression, unreadable, except for the faint glint of someone who finds great joy in difficult questions. His armor is unremarkable, faded plain, dusty at the knees, but his eyes are sharp as if he's already spotted the weak point in your thoughts. You stop a few paces from him, suddenly aware of every fold in your own armor, the chest plate, the bracers, the sleeve that once flew like a kite, the whispering seam the tailor mended. All of it feels louder under his gaze. "Don't worry," he says at last. "I'm not here to hurt you." He gestures toward a low stool beside a small platform made of bundled reeds and straw mats. "But your confidence might get a bruise or two." You sit, heart gently rattling. To your right stands a wooden post painted with a simple red circle. A target, but not for arrows, for proof. He draws his bow slowly. Not to show off, not to intimidate, just with the practiced ease of someone who's let go of everything that doesn't matter. The bow creaks softly. The arrowhead glints once in the light. You're wearing 6 layers of pressed mulberry, 2 coats of lacquer, and 1 poem stitched under your heart, he says, matter-of-factly. "Let's see what that gets you." He releases, thwip. The arrow slices through the air and stops. Just like that. It's embedded in your armor, not deep, shallow. The shaft trembles gently where it's lodged at a diagonal into your chest plate just above the sternum. You're not injured, not even bruised, but your breath hitches. The archer lowers his bow and walks over. He brushes a thumb across the paper layers. The topmost sheet has torn, the next one is dented, but the third still sealed, still holding. You feel the armor breathing. "Strong," he says. "Lucky," you reply. He smiles faintly. Same thing in war. He takes a knife and slices gently into the broken seam, peeling back the torn layer. Beneath it, your poem. Still visible. You forgot what it said. But there it is, clear as sunlight. "I dreamed of armor that knew when not to fight." He reads it aloud and whistles. Soft poetry under hard timing. He steps back and points to the target post. Historians still argue whether this armor was meant to stop arrows or catch them. You tilt your head. "Catch them," you ask. He nods. The way a fisherman's net catches a fish. Not by resisting, but by giving just enough. He lifts another arrow from his quiver. Your turn. He hands it to you. It's warm from the sun and perfectly balanced. Lighter than you expected. You draw back awkwardly, your elbows still unsure of this dance, but you you aim. You don't aim for the center. You aim for the seam. The arrow flies. It strikes the target and quivers half embedded, caught in one of the crisscrossed reed layers. The archer grins. Not bad, he says. You thought like paper. He picks up your helmet and knocks gently on its dome. Even this would deflect a glancing shot if you keep your head down. You glance toward a bundle of broken arrows by the post. These all tested the armor. He nods. Some bent, some bounced, some split. One vanished completely. Crows took it, I think. He kneels beside the platform and shows you a sheet of test results marked not with numbers but with brush drawings, wave patterns, spiral symbols, a diagram of a feather curling against wind. Paper is stubborn, he says. But it needs to be read. You nod, not fully understanding, but wanting to. As you stand to leave, he holds up the arrow he fired at you. The shaft is slightly bent, the tip cracked. He tucks it gently into your belt. Keep it, he says. A reminder. You return to camp with it swaying at your hip, like a question you haven't answered yet. Your armor is heavier now, not with damage, but with knowledge. It's been tested, and it held. Tomorrow the scribes will remeasure you, and argue over whether your armor deserves a footnote or a headline. You're summoned before lunch, not by trumpet, not by messenger, by ink. A slip of parchment carefully folded and placed on your meal tray. 3 characters. To the armory. That's all. You find them in the back chamber, 5 scribes hunched over a low table covered in armor scraps, brushes, and small weights made of carved jade. They don't look up when you enter. They're too busy squinting at a freshly dried gauntlet like it just insulted their handwriting. You clear your throat. The shortest one, whose top knot resembles a startled question mark, waves you forward without speaking. He taps a cushion. You sit. This isn't the armory where you're tested with arrows or soot. This is the recording room, the documentation table, and these are its gatekeepers. They begin with your left sleeve. A brush is dipped, the inner seam is measured, notes are taken in triplicate. You blink and miss the moment when one of them slides your arm from your armor, entirely records 5 precise folds in the paper panel, then slides it back with the efficiency of a tailor crossed with a calligrapher. Mutters the eldest, peering over spectacles thicker than most helmets. This piece flexes too willingly, overworn or underpressed. Another scribe leans in, pokes the shoulder. No, she says. That's the kite boy's fold. They all nod at once, then scribble it down like it's common knowledge. Your poem, another says, was not entered into the registry. You blink. The one inside my chest plate. She nods. We record every poem for pattern recognition, language drift, lyrical repetition, also sentiment analysis. You stare. She opens a scroll and begins writing. I dreamed of armor that knew when not to fight. Another scribe nods. Passive hopeful. Common in kite makers and scouts. Rare in frontliners. Good. They jot it down, then hand you a thin reed stylus and a narrow strip of mulberry parchment. Please compose a second line, says the question mark top knot. You hesitate. Optional adds another, but encouraged. So you write slow and unsure. Let the wind take what fear cannot. They pause, then hum quietly. One of them even smiles. Very scout forward, someone murmurs. Excellent for night missions. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you feel oddly proud. They move on to your leg guards. Measure test. One of them sniffs the seam, frowns, then mutters, still carrying vinegar lacquer. He needs a drying rack closer to fire. More notes. Your helmet is turned over, tapped, then held up to the light. The poem lullaby tucked inside. They find it and read it aloud, softly. It sounds different when spoken, more sacred. The scribes bow slightly after the last line. It hums, one whispers. Good, says another. We've had too many quiet helmets lately. You're not sure if that's a compliment, but you accept it. They ask about the arrow test. You describe it, they draw it right there, a little sketch of your armor with an arrow bent at a polite angle. They label the diagram resilient pause under duress. Before you leave, they stamp your name onto a new scroll, seal it with vermilion wax, and slip it into a wall rack labeled notable suits, active service. The eldest scribe raises a finger. Historians still argue, he says, whether paper armor ever truly deserved its reputation. He taps your sleeve. leave. But we say it remembers better than steel. You bow. He nods. As you exit, a young scribe runs after you and presses a tiny scroll into your palm. You open it when you're alone. It reads, "If ever lost, speak your poem aloud. It will know the way." You tuck it inside your belt beside the bent arrow. Tomorrow you'll be assigned to a new unit, but your armor already knows the path. And the paper has started to whisper in your sleep. You wake to bells, not loud, not urgent, just the slow, resonant kind, deep bronze tones rippling through the valley like someone gently knocking on history's front door. The camp feels quieter today, not still, just slower. You're told to report to the outer barracks, where the old suits are kept. Suits no longer in circulation, no longer shiny. Retired, faded, whispering things only time understands. You're handed a lantern. Even though it's broad daylight, the storeroom is built into a shaded hillside, and the halls inside are cold enough to make your fingertips sting. You step through a narrow gate carved with calligraphy so faint it's nearly lost to dust. A gust of air follows you in damp, mushroom-scented, and not quite stagnant. It smells like things sealed and unsealed over centuries. Rows of wooden pegs stretch along the walls, and hanging from each paper armor, not the kind you wear, the kind that watches, faded reds, cracked lacquers, torn hems lovingly stitched back together with thread that doesn't match. Helmets lined with old lines of verse smudged with rain and time. A steward with chalk on his sleeves and reading glasses too big for his face joins you carrying a cloth bundle in both hands like it's sacred. He unwraps it slowly. Inside a breastplate. Paper, of course, but this one is different. It's yellowed, brittle. The layers are thicker than yours, the folds more angular, and the seams stitched not with silk but with narrow cords made from dyed bark. It's from the Second Sun dynasty, the steward says. Maybe third. Debate ongoing. He offers it to you, you hesitate. Try it on. You slip off your training armor and fasten the old piece. It's stiffer than you expected. Less breathable. But it fits. Perfectly, like the paper has already memorized your shape. It's stitched between dynasties, the steward explains. See here, he lifts the edge and shows you the inner lining. One seam is brown, another is black. A third faintly violet dyed with elderberry ink, barely holding its color. That means 3 different regimes reissued this piece, he says. 3 different armies, 3 different ideologies. Same armor. You shift slightly. The plate creaks like bamboo. A faint crunch. You think something tore, but no. That was just history adjusting its spine. Some say, he continues, it's unlucky to wear a piece that outlived its original wearer. You pause. Others say it means you're chosen. The air feels thicker now, not heavy, just significant. He hands you a mirror, you study your reflection. You don't look like yourself, you look older, not in your face, in your presence. The armor adds gravity, the kind that only comes from having survived stories other people don't believe in anymore. A crack runs diagonally across the left side. It's been repaired but left visible like a scar worn proudly. On the edge of the collar, someone carved 4 characters. Folded time does not forget. You run your fingers over them. Historians still argue, the steward says, whether this armor saw the Battle of Cold Pines, or if that's just a romantic rumor passed down by the scribes. He shrugs, but either way it remembers more than it forgets. You remove the armor carefully, hands tingling from the cold of the lacquer. It's placed back in the cloth, wrapped like a secret. He opens a drawer and hands you a slip of paper. Write something, he says, for the next person who wears it. You hesitate, then write, it fit me before I earned it. I'll earn it before I'm done. He nods satisfied and seals the slip inside the lining with a thin brush of glue. Outside, the sunlight feels warmer, the breeze more familiar. Your own armor hugs your shoulders as you put it back on, softer now, almost proud of you. You walk past the training field where new recruits are learning to fall without flinching. You don't stop to watch. Your armor folds differently now. Tomorrow a farmer will show you his melon patch and explain quite sincerely how your armor helped it grow. You're not sure why you've been assigned to kitchen scraps duty. There's no note, no officer pointing, just a quiet tap on your shoulder during morning tea and a finger pointing toward the lower gardens where the compost heaps steam gently in the early sun like little sleeping dragons. The path there winds past the tool shed, then along a hedgerow humming with bees. You pass a scarecrow dressed in what looks like shredded pauldrons, lacquered still but drooping. It waves slightly in the breeze like it's trying to remember your name. The gardener greets you with with a nod and a half-chewed plum. He wears paper armor, but not the kind you've seen in drills or archives. This one is sun-bleached, patched with hemp twine, and smells faintly of cucumber and damp earth. He leans on a spade with the authority of a general, but the schedule of a man who lets vines tell time. You glance at the pile behind him. It's compost, yes, but not just food, paper. Shreds of armor sleeves, old breastplates softened into curls, ink-washed scraps stained by rain and battle, and dinners long forgotten. You blink. This is the old heap, the gardener says. Failed suits, worn-out coats, retired heroes. He pats the pile like it's an old dog. And this, he says, leading you to a bed of vines nearby is what they become. Melons, bright green, striped fat with dew, growing from soil enriched with the past. You crouch beside one, run your hand along the mottled skin. It smells sweet, clean, warmed by the sun, and apparently by poetry and paste. I swear by my shovel, the gardener adds, this one grew from an arrow-proof sleeve. You laugh. He doesn't. I buried it here last spring. Had a poem in it too. About a goose and a widow. Sad stuff, but sweet melons. He hands you a spade. Your job helps stir the pile. It's warm to the touch, not unpleasant. Bits of torn verses poke out of the mulch. You spot part of a line to bend is not to surrender before it crumbles under your palm. You work for hours, adding water, turning layers, mixing bits of cloth and paste with peels and stems and a few suspiciously perfect feathers. You don't ask. It's strangely meditative, like rebuilding armor backwards, returning every defense, every fold back into the earth that made it. Paper goes quiet when it's ready to become something else, the gardener says. Doesn't fight, just settles. He shows you how to fold strips of failed armor into mulch nets that cradle the roots of young plants. Still useful, he says, even when forgotten. You sit beneath a trellis at midday sipping barley tea while a dragonfly perches on your shoulder guard. Across the garden, a vine curls up through a discarded helmet, splitting the cracked lacquer with leafy fingers. Historians still argue, the gardener says, whether this armor was composted as practicality or ceremony. He grins. I say both. Let the dead feed the hungry. That's good soldiering. You help him harvest 3 melons. One is tagged with a red ribbon. For the quartermaster, he explains, his bracer made this one. You imagine the quartermaster biting into a melon flavored faintly with his own complaints and vinegar glue. It feels correct. Before you leave, the gardener gives you a small pouch of seeds. From the poem Melon, he says, you ask where to plant them. He shrugs. Anywhere you want words to grow. Back at camp, you return to your armor with dirt under your nails and a quiet satisfaction in your bones. The paper along your thigh panel rustles faintly, and you wonder if it's remembering what you just fed it. Tomorrow, you'll walk past shelves filled with boots and scrolls, and learn that not all commanders bark orders, some just organize the library. You're sent to retrieve a replacement sandal. That's the official reason. Your left boot has begun to split at the sole, and someone at Supply decided this mission required a detour through the records building, also known in whispers as the Stack. The Stack is easy to find. It's the only building in camp surrounded by both wooden training dummies and perfectly trimmed hedges. Half monastery, half strategy hall, and judging by the soft candlelight flickering behind its slatted windows, it never quite sleeps. You enter quietly, and immediately step into a world that rustles, scrolls everywhere. Bundles, racks, open shelves packed so tightly the scrolls puff slightly when you walk by like breath held in too long. Some are labeled in elegant brush strokes. Others are scrawled in shorthand and tied shut with faded ribbon. A few are sealed with red wax, so old it's begun to flake like dried plum skin. A woman looks up from behind the central desk. Her boots thud gently against the floor as she stands. Leather, worn soft, real leather rare in a place where bark and paste are the norm. Her robes are simple, dusted with stray fibers. There's a scroll case strapped across her back like a quiver. You begin to explain your footwear issue. She waves it off. You can find a sandal anywhere, she says. But what you need is your record. She walks briskly toward the left wall, weaving between shelves like a dancer tracing familiar steps. You follow. The scrolls smell of pine oil foil, and dried ink. One shelf is marked First Deployment Paperwork by Stitch Pattern. She pulls a scroll at random without checking labels and hands it to you. Your name is on it. You blink. We keep everything she says. Every poem, every sleeve sketch, every feather you didn't report. You open the scroll. There's your armor diagram, your issued verses, a crude sketch of your foot dimensions, a list of people who helped repair your shoulder seam, a note from the tailor written in the margin still too tense in the left elbow. Probably won't cry until section 17. You laugh. She doesn't. She simply points to the boots you're still wearing. Those were meant for a courier who never returned, she says. You've worn them longer than she did. You suddenly feel like you've borrowed someone else's story. She leans against the shelf. We don't just store gear, she says. We store decisions. You glance around. Scrolls tower over you, each one a moment, a fold, a whisper. Historians still argue she murmurs whether these archives are tactical records or bedtime stories the army tells itself to feel brave. She tilts her head, but I say both. She pulls another scroll and hands it to you, blank, untouched. For what you haven't done yet. You stare at the emptiness, then unroll it and add a single line. Walked into the archives and found I wasn't the first to hesitate. She nods. Then from a drawer under the desk, she produces a single sandal. It doesn't match the one you lost. It's better. Not new, just very, very well mended. Stitched in 3 colors with a patch at the toe that carries a faded emblem you don't recognize. You slip it on. It fits. You're assigned to the outer wall watch tomorrow, she says almost offhand. Take the long route. You nod not because it makes sense, but because it probably will. Outside, the air's warm again. The scroll case on your back, empty for now, makes a soft swish when you walk. A reminder that even quiet steps leave stories behind. Tomorrow the fog will roll in over the ridge, and you'll meet soldiers who vanish into it like punctuation marks in a poem. The fog rolls in before breakfast. At first, it creeps just a few long fingers slipping over the eastern ridge, curling down into the river valley like it's trying not to wake the bamboo. Then it thickens, and suddenly, the world is gone. By the time you're climbing the outer ridge for wall watch, the fog is all there is. You can't see 10 paces ahead. The path disappears beneath your boots. The treetops vanish into pale soup. Sounds become strange. Close things sound far. Far-off noises whisper in your ear like old friends in a dream, and that's when you see them. Or rather, you almost don't. Just a flicker, a shadow where there wasn't one, the faintest shift in a clump of fog, then another, figures moving through the white like punctuation marks appearing only at the edge of sentences. You blink and they're gone. You freeze. Then from behind a tree, a quiet voice. Don't move your arms yet. You turn slowly. A soldier in mottled paper armor stands not 3 paces from you, nearly invisible. His breastplate has been brushed with layers of pale gray and soft brown, the kind of camouflage that doesn't hide so much as suggest absence. His sleeves are feather-light, rustling so gently you thought it was wind in the reeds. A second figure steps out behind him. Then a third, perched casually on a boulder like a heron who learned patience from war. The missed unit, the lead, says, "You've heard rumors of the paper-armored scouts who trained in fog so thick they could read maps only by memory, who moved without leaving footprints, who could vanish in a field of tall grass and reappear behind your regrets. You're not sure if they're legends or ghosts, but here they are. Your orders today are simple. Accompany the unit on a mock perimeter run. Observe, learn, do not speak unless addressed. And above all, move like you are not moving, you follow. At first it's awkward. Your boots scuff the gravel, your armor sighs too loudly, your breath feels like shouting, but slowly your body begins to mimic theirs. Step, pause, step again, no rhythm, no predictability. You learn to breathe when the fog does, to duck beneath branches you can't see until they're on your lips. To feel the path beneath your feet the way you'd feel for the end of a poem you haven't memorized. One of the scouts hands you a strip of pale cloth to tie over your face. It's marked with 3 simple brushstrokes. Wind, fold, absent. Don't think of it as disguise, he says. Think of it as permission, you do. And suddenly the paper on your back feels lighter. The fog doesn't feel like something to push through. It feels like a cloak. A place to rest. You pass a group of guards by the outer wall. They don't notice you. One stares straight at your feet and shrugs confused. Must have been the wind, he mutters. The scout beside you smiles. You don't. Smiling is too loud. You reach the far edge of the compound where the trees thin and a narrow watchtower looms in the mist. From its upper platform, someone sends a signal, just 2 taps on a hanging bell. The lead scout nods. Time to vanish. You break into a soft jog, your armor flexing with each movement. No clanking, no rattling, just the sound of dried paper turning pages in rhythm with your knees. The forest accepts you. A single crow caws once, then falls silent. You're not fast, but you're gone. Later, you return to camp alone. The scouts disappear at the edge of the mist like lines at the bottom of a scroll. No farewells, just one whisper left behind. You wore it well. Back at your quarters, your armor is damp, but whole. You peel it off slowly, steam rising from your collar as the warmth of your body leaves the folds. Inside the sleeve, someone has left a mark, not a poem, just a word inked in barely there gray drift. You sleep that night without dreams, just fog. And somewhere in the stillness, the sound of armor brushing through silence. Tomorrow, you'll wake to the smell of warm wax and repair a shoulder plate by candlelight beneath the stars. Night again. The camp has settled into its evening hush, the kind that lives between spoonfuls of soup, between yawns half finished, and the soft, contented groans of boots finally removed. Someone nearby is humming, someone else is snoring like a paper saw, and yet, you're still awake. You sit cross-legged under the rear eaves of the tool, shed a lantern beside you, and a cracked shoulder plate across your lap. The split is thin, but deep running like a fault line through the outer layers of lacquer just beneath the poem, a scribe once called cautiously triumphant. There's a warmth in the air tonight, despite the breeze. Wax drips slowly down the side of your lantern. A shallow dish of melted beeswax glows beside it, flickering faintly gold. You stir it with a brush. Not a new brush. Not fine. The bristles are split, blackened at the edge, and there's a single red thread tied around the handle. The tailor gave it to you earlier with a wink. Don't let the wax fall asleep before you do, she'd said. You press the edge of the cracked armor gently and it creaks like it remembers the moment it split. The sound is almost apologetic. You stroke the brush along the break, letting the wax seep into the seam. It's slow work, careful, the kind of task that invites silence then rewards it. You repeat the stroke, and again, each motion smoother than the last, like winding down a clock made of bark and breath. Warm wax knows what cold lacquer forgets, says a voice beside you. You nearly tip the lantern. It's the archivist librarian barefoot this time, holding a tin of ink and a half-eaten pear. She sits beside you uninvited and watches your repairs without speaking for a while. That crack, she says, finally has existed longer than you've worn it. You just helped it show itself. You blink. I thought I caused it. She shrugs. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it's yours now. You finish sealing the seam and hold the plate up to the light. The wax shines like amber in the flicker. The poem is still visible, faint, but still there. The archivist hands you a tiny stamp. You've earned a mark, she says. The stamp is carved from bone. A simple sigil, a folded fan its edge cracked but open. You press it into the soft wax at the corner of the repair. It seals with a tiny hiss. The librarian nods once, then wanders off into the shadows, humming a line from the lullaby you found in your helmet. You hadn't realized anyone else knew it. You set the armor aside to cool and lay back on the bench arms folded behind your head. The stars above are faint tonight, veiled in the last wisps of mist. But the moon is sharp, bright enough to read by. You pull out your scroll, the one they gave you blank in the archive. The one meant for what hasn't happened yet. You dip your brush in the last of the warm wax and write, "I fixed something I thought I broke." And in return, it stayed. You let the scroll dry beside the armor. Somewhere a kettle whistles. Somewhere else a crow mutters a word it doesn't quite understand. And you drift off to sleep beneath a roof patched with scraps of failed helmets and 1,000 small victories. Tomorrow there will be drums and dancers and armor that moves like paper lanterns in the wind. You wake to drums, not the pounding warlike kind, but festive round, slightly uneven, the sound of celebration that's practiced enough to be confident and offbeat enough to feel human. Laughter follows. Someone is already dancing before breakfast. You sit up and the air smells like sesame oil, sweet rice vinegar, and something vaguely smoky like someone's armor got too close to a cooking fire and now smells delicious by accident. Today is the parade of Jeonju, not a battle, not a reenactment, a ceremony, a march, a quiet boast that says we survived, we endured, and our armor didn't flinch. You've been chosen to walk in the parade, not for your skill, not even for your discipline, but for the story tucked inside your armor. The scribes voted on it. Apparently your poem ranked emotionally efficient. You take your place in the assembly yard where rows of paper-armored soldiers, veterans, tailors, scouts, even 2 librarians are adjusting straps, brushing lint from sleeves, and comparing seamwork like chefs comparing recipes. Each suit is different. One glistens with golden lacquer. Another is patchy, its layers intentionally mismatched to honor fallen friends. A few are brightly colored reds and blues, and even soft greens brushed in floral patterns. You spot a chest plate painted like a crane wing stretched across the wearer's ribs. Yours is quieter, still gray with a fog tone finish, still soft from repairs, still stitched with the humming verse beneath your chest. The boy who flew your sleeve walks beside you, now proudly wearing a kite-strung pauldron and carrying a spool of ribbon in case anything detaches mid-march. Ahead, the musicians begin their procession. Drums, flutes, wooden chimes, and a strange melodic clacking made by hitting folded scrolls together like fans. It's oddly soothing, like someone translating poetry into percussion. You move. Not fast, just steady. Your boots crunch on old gravel. Your sleeves sway in rhythm. The wind catches a few loose strips of armor, fluttering them like banners. The sun gleams on the lacquered seams, making everything shimmer like a field of walking lanterns. Villagers line the road, children pointing elders, nodding merchants, tossing handfuls of dried blossoms into the path. You see a woman mouth the words to your poem as you pass. You never met her, but somehow she knows. You pass under an archway strung with old breastplates suspended like wind chimes. They clack and rattle softly above your head. Someone whispers, "Even the armor watches," and you believe them. Halfway through the parade, you reach the center of Jeonju, the square, with the 5-spoked pagoda and the lantern tree. The tree is real, massive, ancient, covered in parchment tags tied with silk thread. Each tag is a prayer, or a memory, or a promise. You are given one strip of paper. You kneel, write one line, and tie it to a low branch. I carried stories, and none of them broke me. It flutters gently. The librarian with the leather boots walks past and places her own tag beside yours. It reads, "There's room for another scroll," then she's gone. The parade ends, not with trumpets or applause, but with tea. Everyone gathers in the field beyond the town gate where melons are sliced, barley cakes passed around, and people compare seamwork again, this time less competitively. Your armor rests on a mat beside you, catching the late sun. It no longer feels like protection. It feels like a page. Tomorrow you'll lie down in it and realize it makes a better pillow than you'd expect. You don't mean to fall asleep in it. The sun's already dropped low, and the post-parade feast has scattered into clusters of storytellers, fire tenders, and 2 drunk quartermasters arguing about the aerodynamic properties of bracers. You're full of barley cakes and warm tea, and your armor lies beside you on a reed mat, steam rising faintly where your body heat hasn't yet faded from it. You lay your head down just for a moment on your breastplate, thinking maybe it'll be uncomfortable enough to keep you awake. It isn't. It's perfect. Surprisingly soft, supportive in all the right ways. The lacquered layers flex slightly under the weight of your cheek like a very polite book, making room for a new sentence. The faint scent of warmed glue and pressed bark rises into your nose. You blink once. Gone. You dream. You're walking through a library, not one built with shelves or walls, but one made entirely of armor. Suits hang from trees like leaves suspended by invisible threads. Each one turns as you pass, not in a menacing way, just curious. Each carries a voice. One whispers your first poem. Another hums a melody you heard only once on that rainy helmet lacquering day. Another, still smaller than the rest, flutters its sleeve like a kite caught on a rooftop. You walk between them, brushing your fingers across the seams. The armor doesn't creak, it purrs. You sit beneath one that looks like yours, but older, yellowed at the edges, stamped with characters you don't recognize. You rest your head in its lap. It hums a lullaby you don't remember learning, and just as you start to ask it a question, you wake. Still on the reed mat, still curled beside your armor, the field is quieter now. Fires have dimmed to embers. A few figures still sit nearby shoulders, draped in cloaks, voices barely more than breath. The librarian with the scroll quiver sleeps sitting up back against a melon crate. The kite boy is snoring, face half buried in his own pauldron. You stretch. Your neck doesn't hurt. You sit up and run your fingers across the breastplate where your head had rested. No dents, but something's there. A mark. A faint one just visible under the edge where the lacquer had warmed and softened in the firelight. A crease. A new fold perfectly shaped to your jawline. Your armor is learning you. It folds around memory now, not just movement. You slip it back on. It's warm again, but not just from the fire, from being close to you, from being part of your stillness. Historians still argue someone murmurs beside you, whether armor remembers who wore it or just how they slept. You look over. The monk, barefoot, holding a tin of candied ginger. He pops one into his mouth, offers you another. You take it. I say he continues, if it makes a good pillow, keep it. Then he stands and strolls off toward the edge of the field, whistling a tune that might be nonsense or wisdom or both. You lie back down this time fully in your armor, and it feels like bedding, familiar, folded, forgiving. Tomorrow you'll listen to it, really listen, and learn what it remembers that you don't. The morning is slow to arrive. You lie in your armor longer than usual, not because you're tired, but because the paper seems unwilling to let you go. It's warm against your ribs, slightly curled around your shoulders like a blanket. The folds have settled, not stiffly, not tightly, but intentionally, like a book that's been closed for safekeeping and knows exactly where you left off. You sit up. The fire is cold, the field mostly empty now, except for a few scraps of ribbon and a half-finished rice cake someone must have dropped during last night's stories. Your fingers find the edge of your chest plate and press gently along the repaired seam. It hums, faint, fainter than before, but it's there. You shift your weight and the left pauldron creaks ever so slightly, just enough to remind you of the kite boy's string, of how it caught the wind and returned. The sound of your armor brushing together now feels less like movement and more like a whisper. You stand, and it comes with you. Your armor doesn't resist. It follows, as if it woke up with you, as if it too had a dream. You make your way to the eastern path where dew clings to the bamboo like melted wax. Each step feels measured less because you try more because your armor expects it. It guides your knees, tucks your elbows in, gently encourages your steps to land softly, not with force, but with respect. You stop by the old training post, the one where the archer bent an arrow against your ribs. The shaft is still tucked in your belt, worn smooth now. You pull it out, balance it on your palm. The armor tightens slightly across your chest as if bracing or remembering. You smile, and you ask it softly under your breath, unsure whether it will answer. What do you remember? A breeze passes, and then the faintest sensation, not in your ears, but in your bones. A rhythm, a memory, a foggy morning, and footsteps that didn't echo. A tailor's thread pulling regret into a sleeve. A monk sliding a scroll into your collar. A melon patch that grew from someone's bravery. A cracked helmet that hummed lullabies. You feel it all, layered, pressed, lacquered into the seams. Your armor has become a library, not of facts, but of moments. Folded time, and you're not wearing protection anymore. You're wearing a story, and it remembers every page you've added. You walk slowly back to camp, and as you pass the drying racks, you hear a familiar snore. The quartermaster. He waves a spoon in your direction halfway through a bowl of pickled radish porridge. Still in uniform, he calls. You know you're not on duty, right? You pat your chest once fondly. It's comfortable. He raises an eyebrow. Comfortable? That's not in the manual. You grin. Neither is poetry. He chuckles and shakes his head, muttering something about soft soldiers, but there's no bite in it. You stop by the scribe's table on your way in. The young assistant greets you with ink-smudged fingers and a look of someone who's been awake since before logic. You missed your entry yesterday, she says. You nod, then pull the empty scroll from your sleeve, the one they gave you in the archive, and place it on the table. You brush a line of ink across the top. I wore it to remember. I remember to wear it. She reads it twice, then stamps it. Archived, she says softly. You walk away. Your armor folds gently as you move. It doesn't chafe. It doesn't doesn't rattle. It breathes, it hums, and it waits for the next time you need it, for the next chapter, for the next quiet march, because the war may never come, but if it does, you won't just be ready, you'll already be written. The fire is low now. You lie back in your armor once more, the seams cradling your breath like an old friend who's memorized your rhythm. The stars have returned, soft, slow blinking through thin clouds like sleepy eyes. Your heartbeat settles, your breath slows, and still the armor hums not loud, not proud, just present, not remembering battles, not waiting for war, just keeping you company. Your fingers drift across the poem stitched beneath your collar. You mouth the words one last time, not to recite, but to rest. The armor creaks like a page being turned gently in the dark. And now it's quiet, the kind of quiet that cradles, not empties. The kind of quiet where stories sleep, and so as your mind folds inward and the edges of the world soften, let your shoulders relax, let the weight of the armor melt, let the breath find its way home.